This episode of Q Point Podcast is pre-recorded, produced and sponsored by Karina Quirk, broker at Next Home Experience.
Different views.
I know your story.
From different cues.
Incredible job.
He's David Quirk.
You brought it up.
And she's Karina Quirk.
Imagine.
This is
Q Point.
Joining us now in studio is former Maine Governor and Republican candidate for Maine's 2nd Congressional District, Paul LePage. Welcome back.
It's nice to be back.
Yes, Paul, thank you for coming back.
Since we last spoke, what feedback are you hearing most from the voters across the 2nd District?
Affordability. Energy, food, insurances. It's never ending. I don't care if you're in Lewiston or Fort Kent or Washington County. It's exactly the same.
Has anything you've heard from the voters caused you to sharpen or rethink a policy position?
Not really. I think it's pretty consistent. I think the one thing that I'm starting to see is how bad the lumber tariffs are hurting the state. That is really becoming very critical, and we've spoken to the White House on a number of occasions. They've been very helpful in some instances, but as far as removing them, that's not on the cards yet.
What about the lobster industry? Have you heard any of that, where our lobster's being processed up there? Is that hurting us?
No, it's actually important that we do that because we don't have the capacity to process all the lobster. So it's a good marriage. The problem is Atlantic Canada and Quebec have always been exempt from tariffs up until Trump's first term. And he wasn't the one that caused the problem. It was actually a Maine company that caused the problem. So we lost our exemption, and now we have to pay tariffs. So it hurts all the industries. Unfortunately, it was a lumber mill that caused the problem, and now we're suffering.
Speaking of Lewiston, you helped to raise money for the survivors and families affected by the Lewiston shooting. And later you raised concerns when a portion of the funds were directed to nonprofits. Tell us about it.
Okay, well, there was two different issues here. The monies we raised and we distributed directly to the families. It didn't go to the Maine Community Foundation. We were separate. And the reason we were separate is because we wanted to get some money out to the folks, the families for that Christmas in the winter, because the massacre happened in October, and we wanted to get some money to them as quick as possible. The Maine Community Foundation, that was a long-term process. I was very, very disappointed to find out that only 2/3 of the money that was raised, $4.7 million out of $6.9 million, made it to the families and first responders, but not even to all the first responders. For instance, the person who extracted all the bodies, who get in there and took all the bodies to the coroner's office in Augusta, they never even got noticed. They never even got thanked. In fact, it was so horrific that Clayton Roy, who worked for the funeral parlor, just gave it up. He just retired and said, I don't want to see that kind of stuff again. So I was very, very disappointed. I spoke to the governor about it. I asked her to join me to raise money for the Christmas, and she chose not to, and that's fine. So we did it alone. We would have done much better had she helped us, I believe. But what she did tell me was that the money by the Community Foundation would go to the families and first responders and people that were there at the site. Never any mention of about 1/3 of the money going to nonprofits, NGOs.
Is there an investigation involved?
Not that I'm aware of. I know that there's some families that have worked with the Maine Wire, and my daughter and I have tried to get people interested in looking into it, but nobody seems to be interested.
So I know you've been hearing out there on the campaign trail, as we discussed earlier, is electricity. Is there anything on the federal level that can help out the electricity bills here in the state of Maine, which seems to be skyrocketing?
In order to go to Canada and buy electricity, you need the president to sign off. And so, I'm going to certainly try to get power from Edmundston, New Brunswick to Madawaska. It's just across the river. And if you connected there, you could get a lot cheaper electricity all over the northeast of the state of Maine. Ever since we deregulated electricity, it's been going skyrocketing. And right now with net metering and with the solar policies that they have in the state, there's no question that Maine is now the 4th highest electricity cost in the United States. Hawaii, California, Massachusetts, and Maine.
If we do decide to do these regional nuclear plants, would there be any help from the federal government?
Absolutely. There's no question there'd have to be some help at the federal government, and that would really go a long ways to helping the whole problem. Matter of fact, when I get to Washington, the first thing I'm going to do is make sure the federal subsidies on solar are destroyed, because we got to stop this. This insanity is crazy. It's taken up a lot of our farmland, particularly up north, it's eating up our farmland, and we're not getting cheap energy because they tied the contracts to the cost of gas. And we don't have gas because, there again, New York won't let us come across New York State with pipeline. And so it's just insane what we're doing. The blue states are killing this country.
Now, the PUC is also involved with setting the rates. Am I correct?
No, PUC, they implement the law that is handed down by the legislature. In Maine, the problem isn't the PUC, although currently the people on the PUC are less than what I call top-notch, but it's really the legislature that earmarks, and they're totally incompetent in what they're doing.
How will you approach federal immigration policy, particularly when it comes to legal immigration versus illegal immigration?
Right now, the way that they're doing it, I'm a little concerned because they're putting everybody in the one basket, and that's it. If you're an immigrant, you go into one basket. I believe there are three approaches. Number one, anybody that committed the crime, you're out of here. Number two, anybody that crossed the line illegally under the Biden administration, you're out of here. After that, I would look at everybody else, particularly those that have the paperwork. They've come in legally, but now they're being forced out. And that I'm concerned about, because we're going to be losing some good people. You know, this country is a country of immigrants. So if you don't like the current law, let's fix it so that we can go back and bring in people that want to move and better themselves here in the United States. This idea of just running across the border is silly, and I think Biden really harmed this country, and hopefully we can get it back, but it's going to take time. I don't think one term is going to be enough. Right now, I'm more concerned about the northern border than I am the southern border. What we're hearing is there's a lot of drugs coming in from the northern border, and we're hearing a lot of people are coming in illegally from the northern border. And we're seeing arrest after arrest. I mean, they're setting records every month on arrests. I don't think they'd be setting records had they been able to stay here during the Biden years, because they sent all the northern people down to the southern border to do paperwork instead of capturing illegals and stopping the drug flow. So I think we're starting to settle in a little bit. I think we need some drastic improvements in our laws. The other thing that really upsets me to no end is when you have a governor who is telling law enforcement not to cooperate with federal agencies. And I think that's just unbelievable. The governor of Maine just recently didn't sign the bill, but let it go into law without her signature, which is just a chicken way out.
And you're referring to LD 1971.
1971. She does not deserve to be in politics, and I hope Susan Collins just clocks her.
You are listening to Q Point Podcast. I'm Karina Quirk, co-hosting with my husband, David Quirk, and we are having a discussion with former Maine Governor and Republican candidate for Maine's 2nd Congressional District, Paul LePage. Speaking of drug trafficking, would you seek to have Maine designated as a high-intensity drug trafficking area, or HIDTA, a federal designation that provides additional funding, intelligence sharing, and coordination for law enforcement? And what would that mean in practical terms for public safety in Maine?
I absolutely believe it, because people don't realize that it's not just the 95 that's the problem, and it's not just the Canadian border. We have east of our state is the ocean, and we have an awful lot of drugs that come in from the ocean. And so, yes, I'd say we are probably one of the easiest targets because we lack law enforcement. I mean, we're struggling to fill our police departments and our sheriff's departments, and the Coast Guard. It needs to be beefed up. There's no question about it. I think the coast, the northern border, and the 95 should be enhanced. And if the state doesn't want to help, then we certainly have to ask the federal government to come in.
We've had several in law enforcement here on the podcast, and they all seem to say that now they're seeing kilo quantities instead of an ounce, half ounce. And it's been very shocking to them.
Oh, absolutely. And the other thing is the Chinese cartels. They're not only dealing in drugs, but they're dealing in human trafficking. I mean, this is a major issue. And what do we have? We have a governor who's making money from it, or at least her family is.
Can you expand on that?
My understanding is the governor's brother is doing all the legal real estate work for these cartels. And then her sister-in-law happens to be a judge in the drug court. And so, I mean, it speaks for itself.
What I'd like to ask you, Paul, is as a business person, what do you think about this increase 0.5% to the employee and another 0.5% to the employer on the Family Leave Act?
The Family Leave Act should be repealed. It's awful. It's going to destroy small business. And the backbone of Maine is small business. The one thing nobody wants to address is we have 90% of the state of Maine is a forest. It's one of the most valuable assets the state of Maine has, and it's not using it. Why? Because of policies coming out of Augusta. They're making it impossible for people to make money. J.D. Irving just built a $1 billion plant in Macon, Georgia to make paper, and they own 1 million acres of land in Maine. But why is that plant here? Because one, taxation, regulations, and energy. Those are the 3 reasons that he can't make money in Maine versus going to Macon, Georgia, and building a $1 billion investment. So the Family Leave Act is crazy. It's not affordable. Actually, what I would do if I was the governor, I would repeal the Family Leave Act and I would go into childcare a lot heavier because we need young people to come to Maine and work. And childcare is an enormously expensive proposition. So you need to have it affordable so the young women and young men can go to work. The other thing that we don't do here, and I tried for 8 years and the Democrats wouldn't go along, all they want to do is forgive student debt. You don't forgive student debt. You got to pay it. You borrowed it, you got to pay it. The issue is it's got to be affordable. This 9, 10, 12% on student loans is crazy. They should be at 1 or 2% if you're working here. Have the employers get involved and have long-term contracts with these people to help pay the student debt off so they can buy houses, they can buy cars before they're 40. It used to be, I got my first house, I was around 30. Nowadays, it's 40. I mean, it's crazy. I spoke to a doctor. The day she made her last payment, student debt payment, she retired. She was 65.
You know, I know we discussed this about being the oldest state in the country. I was wondering what your thoughts are, how we can try to turn that around, because what happens is obviously older people, such as myself, use the hospital a lot more than younger people.
Of course.
And we all know with Maine Care and with everything else going on is driving the cost. In some cases, you have to go outside the state to get health care done because it's such a long waiting list.
Exactly. And frankly, Obamacare or Affordable Care Act, which is totally unaffordable, needs to be revised. In fact, we're working on a plan right now to bring back what we had in 2010, we implemented in 2011, is a system that young people can get involved in. And you don't have these high rates because they don't use it. So you have a system that encourages you to stay healthy. And right now what we do is you get sick and they bill you.
Yeah, like we have with workman's comp. If you don't get hurt, we have safety bonuses program to keep doing the right things. They can make more money if they don't get hurt at work.
That's correct. We can do that in healthcare. For instance, in Florida right now, they have groups of people, 65 and older. They're dealt with specialists. They're primary care physicians, but they only deal with elderly people. And then you have doctors that only deal with up to 30-year-old and 30 to 60. So you get 3 groups. And they specialize in the healthcare of those people, what makes them healthy. It works a lot better. For instance, you get an MRI here in Maine, it's about $2,500. You get an MRI in Florida, it's about $500. It's so much cheaper. Now, there's a lot more people in Florida, so the facilities are used a lot more. Here, we're very rural, and our hospitals don't have the population base to make it affordable. So you gotta be able to bring younger people in to the state. And you got to keep your young people in the state. And with the policies that we have now, it won't happen.
Well, as your time as governor, you paid off the hospital debt. How did your administration make that happen?
Yes, we did. $750 million. And how we did that is $500 million was from the federal government. It was their share. $250 million was our share. So we borrowed money to pay off the hospitals. So the federal government paid their share off. And then we brought the liquor business back in as the revenue to pay off the bonds that we borrowed. In fact, we were making an extra $30 million a year in this future fund that Janet Mills found a way to get in and spend it. The problems with the hospitals is that Janet Mills, in her infinite wisdom, grew Medicare by 100,000 people. Out of that 100,000 people, 90% had insurance and they dropped it and went on Medicaid. Well, the problem with Medicaid, it only pays 60 cents on a dollar. So if you're on Medicaid and you go to the hospital's losing 40 cents on every dollar of care they're providing. And that's the fact. So growing Medicare and taking people off commercial insurance is stupid. It's absolutely stupid. So what happens is, to give you an example, back when I was at Martin's and Obamacare came in, 74% of the people were taking company insurance. And a lot of others, their husbands were getting the insurance, so most people were insured. So what they did when Obamacare came in, they all dropped off and went on Medicaid. It dropped from 74% down to 29%. So when I became governor, we said, we're not going to do that. We're going to take people off Medicaid and find them some alternatives. Now, the alternative for those people, up until recently, was that Obamacare would subsidize. And now there's a big battle going on that the Republicans don't want to continue subsidizing and the Democrats want a minimum of 3 more years. And my feeling is we should do 1 more year and make a commitment. The Democrats and Republicans make a commitment to figure out a way to pass a facility, a new law that will be a lot less expensive than the Affordable Care Act. And it can be done because we proved it here in Maine. The problem with what we did was Obamacare outlawed it because we were going across state lines to buy insurance. And you can't do that under the Obamacare system.
You are listening to Q Point Podcast. I'm Karina Quirk, co-hosting with my husband, David Quirk, and we are having a discussion with former Maine Governor and Republican candidate for Maine's 2nd Congressional District, Paul LePage.
I know when you were governor, our schools were rated a lot higher than what they are today. At the level that you can be as a congressman, how do you get us back up to the top?
The reason Maine fell in the rankings, and it fell drastically. In fact, when I was governor, when I took over as governor, we were 27th. We dropped it to 19th. We were 19th in the nation. Now we're 47th. And so we've really gone bad. And the problem is the federal government. It really is the federal government's problem. The education department and No Child Left Behind system is designed for large inner city programs. It's not designed for rural states. So states like Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Montana, these states that are rural in nature suffer a great deal because we don't have the big inner city groups. So that's a big reason why our scores are going down. The reason that property taxes are going up so high is schools in our state. In fact, if we would have been following the Constitution of the state of Maine, each community would pay for schools. And the Constitution says the community will pay for their own schools, not the state and not the federal government. But of course, over time, it's easy to take money. And so now we have a teachers union that's the most powerful in the nation, and they're hurting our kids. The union is the problem. I look at winners and losers in education. The winners are the superintendents, the administrations of the schools, because they're way overpaid, and there's too many of them. So they're the big winners, and the union itself is a big winner. The big losers are the students and the teachers. Teachers can't teach because they're restricted on all these regulations, and the kids aren't learning. And then to top it all off, in a rural state like Maine, property taxes are skyrocketing. And the reason why? We love home rule. Home rule means we made the decision we don't want to work with anybody. We don't want to consolidate. We don't want to consolidate the buses. We don't want to consolidate the payroll. We don't want to consolidate nutrition. So we want to do everything in our little school system. And people can look at this all they want. You go to Waterville, Winslow, Oakland, and Fairfield. 4 high schools. In '64, every one of those high schools, except for Oakland, was a Class A. Now they're all Class C. You put them all in one high school, you'd have one high school that's a Class A. So you only need one principal, one superintendent, and you'd have kids learning because you could offer more curriculum. For instance, when I was the mayor of Waterville, Winslow had offered French 5, 4 kids in the class. Waterville offered French 5, 5 kids in the class. We had 9 kids who could easily it wouldn't even be a big class. And 9 kids, you'd have one teacher. You could either offer German or another language, or you could drop it, and they'd have a better education. But people don't want to do that.
So do you support President Trump's plan to dismantle the Department of Education?
Absolutely. I think it's the best thing we can do, and that will force the state to start looking in the mirror and say, okay, well, maybe it's not so bad if the Winslow kids' junior high is in Waterville and the high school is in Winslow. It's maybe not a bad deal. I think until we get there, the quality will not be there because we don't have the numbers, and the cost going to keep going up.
Speaking of kids, and I know you are friends with Bill Diamond, and as you know, we just did a fundraiser a week or two before he passed away. And I know you're involved with foster care. And what are your feelings of what's been going on over the last few years with our foster program?
It's just horrible. It's absolutely incredible that we take kids that should not be under a certain roof and under a certain conditions, and we take them in the foster care system. Foster care is underpaid. We don't have enough. We don't do enough training. And the first thing that needs to be done, and Bill Diamond, I remember back in 22 when I ran against Janet Mills, I was talking to Bill Diamond, trying to get him to become the commissioner of DHHS so that we could take anything to do with children right out of that system. Get it out of DHHS and get it into a child protection and a system that deals only with children. And the other thing that I would do is I would put it under public safety. I would not put it under a social program. I'd put it under the auspices of public safety. So you'd have the fire marshal, the state police involved, and you have to do a lot more training of our social workers. We bring these 22, 23-year-olds right out of college, put them in these dire situations. Kids are being killed, and under this administration, it's gone from like 20 in my 8 years to 130. It's crazy. The numbers are just astronomical, and they don't want to do anything about it. So it needs to be done. And as a matter of fact, in Washington, I would be after the Attorney General to do an investigation in Maine.
Speaking of public safety, what is your thought on the state police taking over the Capitol Police?
Well, what's happened with the Capitol Police in the last 8 years is probably a good thing. I find it unnecessary. I mean, they had a good leader at one point, but the governor decided to get rid of him. And they got rid of him. Then they brought somebody in that was not so good. And then we have a whole lot of problems. The state police and public safety in the state of Maine has its own problems because of recruitment and the jail system and the prison systems. So they've got their hands full as well. But good leadership can solve a lot of this. For instance, we used to have a really good, very strong computer crimes division. The governor is not interested in computer crimes. So she stopped it. One lieutenant in the state police wasn't supposed to go to the crime lab and look at a certain thing, but he did because he knew there was something vicious going on, and he was reprimanded for it. So he left. So that's what happens when good people talk with their feet.
I'm not sure if you've been following the media recently. They've been talking about all these stories about the mail not making it to people's houses. And we are one of those houses. As a matter of fact, I think we get the mail once a week. Twice a week if we're lucky. And that's been going on for quite some time. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's unfortunate. I didn't realize it was that big a problem. I mean, of course, that's a federal issue. That's not a state issue. So, I'll look into it. It sounds to me like they're cutting back too much.
Yeah, staffing issue is what they told us.
Yeah, staffing issues. And, the competition between UPS and FedEx, I believe, has got to have an impact on the mail. And the mail is already getting very expensive, and so the only place they can go is to cut back. There's only one thing that I believe the federal government does well, and that's defense. Everything else they should leave alone and get the hell out of the way and let the states and the private sector deal with it. FedEx is private sector, the UPS is private sector, and they've been kicking the butts of the mail system for a number of years.
Well, we used to be able to put a simple hold on our mail when we went on vacation, but the last time we did that, it took 6 weeks to get our mail back, and that was after we went through Senator Collins' office to resolve it.
We had similar problems when we go to Florida in the winter and Maine in the summer, and you stop mail and you transfer, and it's always a mess. It takes at least 5 or 6 weeks to get it squared away and get your mail in the right place. And sometimes you get other people's mail, which is crazy. I got other people's mail yesterday. Yeah. I couldn't believe it.
Well, when people are waiting for checks, living paycheck to paycheck, and relying on the mail to pay their bills, it's pretty serious.
Yeah. Particularly the people getting the checks. I mean, if you owe somebody money, don't worry, they'll get it.
They'll find you.
They'll find you. But the checks, it's a big issue because that will just lay dormant someplace and somebody's going to struggle. And it's very, very unfortunate. But that's very good to know. I'll get on that.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 with former Maine Governor and Republican candidate for Maine's 2nd Congressional District, Paul LePage. Make sure to tune in for part 2 tomorrow, Sunday, January 4th at 6:30 a.m. on VOM, The Voice of Maine. You don't want to miss it.
You've been listening to Q Point.
Follow us at qpointpodcast.com or on your favorite streaming app.
This is where you can get the news from the people who make the news.
Make sure to join us next time.
We hope you tune in.
Q Point Podcast invites guests and candidates from all parties to join the conversation. The views, information, opinions, and comments expressed during this program do not necessarily represent those of the host, Q Point Podcast, associates, affiliates, and CQRE LLC.
Thanks for being a part of the conversation. The most important voices aren't always the loudest ones. They're the voices of everyday people, raising families, running businesses, serving their towns. That's who we want to hear from. Share your ideas with us online, and let's make sure those voices are never left out. Find us on Facebook or on X or at qpointpodcast.com. We look forward to hearing from you. Catch every episode at qpointpodcast.com or wherever you stream. Tune in and tell your friends.